as long as we can see people buying this thing in 10 years and we can see at least 18 to 24 months of consistent leadership in the category, we think, and that's not, you can't take that for granted, right? Winning on Amazon is not like financial arbitrage where you just buy it and it kind of floats its way along. But we think we have an engine where if you have shown that you're leading within the category, we can take that and we can accelerate it and we can global and through other channels.
Bread Ideas episode number 361.
Hey, I know what'll cheer you up.
Welcome to the Bright Ideas Podcast, where we let proven experts help you to find the next bright idea to implement in your business today. And now, here's your host, Trent Dyrsmid.
This is unbelievable.
Its true force has never been fully understood.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bread Ideas Podcast. My name is Trent Dyrsmid and I am your host. If you're looking for proven strategies to grow your SaaS or your e-commerce business, well, you are in the right place because as the host of this show, I've spent the last 10 years interviewing hundreds of founders, getting them to disclose their most effective growth strategies, tactics, and hacks. And my goal with every single episode is to get them to present those to you and to me in such a way that you can jot it down on a piece of paper and implement it in your business starting today. So before we introduce my guest on today's show, which is a fellow by the name of Chris Bell, I want to take a moment for a couple of quick announcements. Number one, if you are looking to build an Amazon reseller business, we have a Facebook group for that, and you can get to it at brightideas.co/Facebook. And if this is your first time listening to one of the shows, or you're not yet familiar with who I am and you would maybe like to follow me on social media, I do encourage that you follow me on Twitter, among other places, but at least Twitter, and that's at Trent Dyrsmid, because I do share content there that I don't share anywhere else. Plus, it's a way you can directly interact with me if you would like to do so. And finally, if you're a repeat listener, welcome back. Thank you so much for tuning in again. If you haven't already done so, would love it if you would take a moment and leave a positive rating and review on your favorite podcast listening app. And now, a word from our sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by Flowster. If you run an e-commerce business and are struggling to effectively delegate your highly repetitive work to your team, Flowster's workflow management software and pre-made e-commerce playbooks make hiring, training, and delegating to your team an absolute breeze. Check it out today at flowster.app. On the show with me today is Chris Bell, founder and CEO of a company called Perch. Their business model is a consumer brands company, and they are focused on acquiring and building direct-to-consumer businesses. Chris has a very diverse and interesting background, and as a result of his background, the way they are building Perch as a technology platform first is actually very interesting and something that we talked about at some length in the interview. Prior to starting Perch, Chris, who is a software engineer by training, worked for 3 years at a company called Wayfair and helped them to open 50 new distribution facilities. And during that time, reduced the time it took Wayfair to deliver a couch from 30 days all the way down to 2. Before that, Chris worked as a principal at Bain & Company, and while there, he gained extensive experience in mergers and acquisitions. So as you can see, Chris' career path has ideally positioned him to lead Perch towards his goal of $1 billion consumer products company. So with all that said, please join me in welcoming Chris to the show. Hey, Chris, welcome to the show. It is a pleasure to have you here.
Nice to be here, Trent. Thanks.
So for folks who aren't yet familiar with you or your company, let's start off with that. Perch, what's the company do? When did you start it?
Yeah, Perch started essentially January of 2020. And we buy great Amazon products and brands, and we add them to our technology platform, and we scale them internationally to other e-com marketplaces, and starting to get into brick and mortar and wholesale channels. And so really what we're doing is looking for the best of the best, and we want to take them to the next level.
So the industry description would be like an FBA aggregator. Do you guys call yourselves that?
Yes, that's an accurate description. We don't refer to ourselves that way because that seems a little bit too mechanical and financial oriented. And we truly believe we're buying brands that could be future household names. And that's what we think we're building as a company where we are, Amazon is one of the most competitive marketplaces in the world. And so if you've been successful on Amazon, and there's some other characteristics we look for, which we can talk about, but in general, you built a good product, right? If you have consistent profitability, you have a good ranking, you're not going crazy on ad spend to maintain that. In general, we find these to be very durable products and brands, and ones that we think have a right to be kind of more broadly enjoyed.
Yes, indeed. And folks in the audience, this is the third interview in a series that I've done with founders or leadership of companies that are in the FBA aggregator / roll-up space. So if you are looking for additional interviews, there'll be one with the founder of Thrasio, and there's also one with the founder of what was called Recon Brands, but they've renamed themselves now to Elevate Brands. But if you search for those in the search box on brightideas.co, you will be able to find them. So Perch today, 25 acquisitions, is that right? Or has there been another one since you and I talked?
There has been a couple more. So yeah, we're growing fast.
Excellent. Okay. So did you, right in the beginning when you got the idea that, hey, this is the thing I want to do, what happened after you got the idea of, hey, this is the thing I want to do? Just kind of like elaborate on that.
Yeah, sure. If you don't mind, maybe I'll back up a little bit before that and tell a little bit about my background, because that it feeds into why I thought this was a good idea. So really quickly, computer engineer by training. First job out of undergrad was doing product management, so designing and implementing software solutions. Learned a lot. That was at GE, actually, in Milwaukee, and learned a lot, but decided I didn't want to work at a company that size. So I got into sales, sold copiers and software for a couple of years, went to business school. And then after business school, I went to Bain & Co., where I worked about a third of my time in the private equity group, doing over 40 transactions with leading private equity firms. The other 2/3 of my time at Bain was helping retail and tech companies grow, doing things like B2B sales force effectiveness, pricing, new products, new markets, stuff like that. A lot of fun. After Bain, I joined Wayfair, where I helped build Wayfair's North America supply chain, what they now call the Wayfair Delivery Network. It was an amazing 3.5 years. I joined Wayfair when they were just over $1 billion in revenue. And so it's kind of a really pivotal inflection point for them. And in that 3.5 years, we opened 50 sites across North America, 42 final mile centers, 8 sort centers, delivering things like couches, vanities, and hot tubs. And one of the things I'm most proud of was while we were there, we went from an average, it took about a month on average to get a couch from Wayfair when I joined. Which is crazy in e-commerce to think about. And when I left, we were doing 2-day delivery of couches, hot tubs, and vanities. And so just really paradigm shifting for the Wayfair customer. And these are complex because they're in-home scheduled deliveries. So it's not like they can just drop the thing on your front doorstep 2 days later. We scheduled windows, we assembled couches. There's just a lot of variability in that. A lot of fun. But then I started looking for the next thing. I felt like I was running a team of about 1,300 across North America, across those 50 sites. And it was going really well, but I loved the early stages of Wayfair. I loved building, and I wanted to go do that again. And so when I found this idea, when I discovered more about Amazon and a third-party marketplace and these sellers, that honestly, I went to a conference down in New York and met a bunch of them, and I just think they're great people in general. They're just really bootstrap entrepreneurs, have built something real and profitable with their own money. So I enjoyed that. But then as I thought about my personal experience, feels like the last decade of my career, 15 years of my career, has been building to something like this, where I know M&A really well. I've done a lot of M&A transactions at Bain. I know e-commerce and supply chain really well. And supply chain is a really hard part of running these businesses. And then early in my career, worked on developing and designing scale software solutions, which is a really big part of what we're building at Perch. So when I started thinking about this idea, I just got more and more excited. Not only that this is a really exciting space and a space that was underserved in terms of entrepreneurs who wanted exits, but also something that just I personally feel like I could differentially be good at. So as I had this, saw this realization, had the idea, I started talking, as most people do, friends and mentors, got them to challenge me. Is this a good idea? How should I think about doing this? A lot of investors pushed me towards software, right? They said, don't actually buy the companies. just develop software that they can use, because that's a thing that a lot of investors like to underwrite is software as a service type of things. Because I just thought about
exactly what I do.
Yeah, which is a good business, right? As I thought about what I think we can build and where the value is, I think the real value is in taking these products and brands that are amazing and taking them to the next level. And it's possible to do that through software, but it's hard because you can't force people to use your software. You can't force people to enter Europe or to sell on Walmart. And not that we can force people to sell to us either. But at the end of the day, once we own the brand, we can get really aggressive with it, right? We know how to run supply chain. We know how to launch in Europe. We know how to launch on Walmart's marketplace, right? And so we can, my thesis was that we can be much more successful by taking these products and brands and taking them to the next level. So then I went, I thought about doing some of this with my own money at first. I started shopping for smaller businesses. I do okay, but I don't have enough money to buy a whole bunch of these with my own personal money. So I thought about doing it myself, but in parallel, I started talking to institutional investors because I thought to really do this, you need money, right? To buy companies. This isn't a business you can do over a few years with a computer. You need to get some cash and go out and buy some real businesses, especially because the thesis is that scale matters. Because these entrepreneurs have been really successful, but they get to a point where they don't have as much access to working capital. And a lot of them could hire a team, but they just don't want to, right? They get to a point where they're like, you know what, hiring people sucks. And I just don't feel like doing that. And for us to hire the best and the brightest, for us to be able to build a technology platform, technology, as you know, is more valuable the more you can scale it. Building an entire tech platform for 2 or 3 brands probably won't pay for itself. Building it for 100 or 1,000 brands, right? You can get meaningful scale leverage off that technology platform. And so I wanted to go big. I wanted to build scale so that we could do the things that I thought we could on the tech side, on the cost advantage side, like supply chain optimization, cost takeout, things like that. So I started shopping. I met with 50 different investor groups, and I got a lot of people saying, "Yeah, seems kind of neat. Not sure." Why don't you do software? A lot of people, you should just do software. And luckily for me, Alex, who's my lead investor at Spark Capital, saw it and he loved it. And he thought it was a great idea. And so once I met with him, it moved pretty quickly. That's the way a lot of these investors work, is they see something they're excited about, they can move pretty quickly. And so I think we had a term sheet within a week or two, and we signed it. And then we started small, right? We bought a few really small businesses at first because we didn't want to buy something big and mess it up. And
let me jump in with some questions there on that, the fundraising, when you got the conversation with Alex. So when you're talking to Alex, you've not acquired a brand, correct? Yeah. So no brand, no cash flow, no revenue. You've got basically like 17 slides in your pitch deck, and you got a term sheet off of that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And are you at liberty to disclose the pre-money valuation?
No.
Can you give us a range? Was it between 5 and 10 million, or was it over 10 million, or was it?
I'd say, call it 5 to 20.
Okay. Interesting. So this guy is basically looking at you and your background and thinking, okay, you're a smart guy. You've got lots of relevant experience, and you've got this vision, which I happen to agree is a good vision. So we're going to basically make up a valuation out of air. I'm sure they have a formula for it, but more or less we're all kind of just throwing darts at a dartboard in the early days. And so how much are you able to disclose? How much was it? Millions or tens of millions that you raised? I would imagine it was only just a couple million initially.
Correct. It was not 10. It was below 10.
Yeah.
High single digits all in. With that, we were able to get some debt on top of it as well.
Okay. So some equity, some debt. What percentage of equity versus debt?
It was about 50-50.
And all from the same place?
No.
All from Alex.
No. Once I got the equity term sheet, then I went on the road shopping for debt. A lot of time talking to investors. Yeah.
How long did it take you to get the debt after you had the equity?
The first time, probably 3 or 4 months.
Okay. So a lot of pitching, pitch over and over and over.
A lot of work. Yeah. It's everybody likes to look back and say like, oh, these guys made it because they got some money. But It was not easy. Today, as people, I think, more and more investors are excited about the space. Back then, it was just a confusing, different business model.
Yeah.
It took a lot of pitching and a lot of conversations, and you just got to find the person that likes you. The other thing, frankly, that Alex and I had, we hadn't met each other personally before, but Spark was one of the first investors in Wayfair. I think the first investor in Wayfair. And so he'd been on Wayfair's board for a while. He had left the board before I joined, but I got a nice, I think, very good recommendation from Neeraj, the CEO and founder of Wayfair, and James, the CEO of Wayfair. So that helps as well.
That was the missing piece. And I think you told me that in our pre-interview and I had forgotten because there was, that makes a lot more sense. Because I'm like, wow, this guy's really, really aggressive investor. Here's this guy. He's never met him before. He's got 17 slides and he's like, yeah, let me write you a 7-figure check. Okay. So you close the round and what happens then? I'm assuming hiring.
A little bit. I didn't want to hire a whole big team of people and then not have a business. And so I had a friend from Wayfair who was leaving Wayfair and just helped out part-time, but mostly it was me we were in a WeWork, but a WeWork style kind of monthly office rental. And started calling all the brokers, right? We didn't feel like spinning up an outbound effort. So we started, calling all the brokers, digging through them. We hired some outside diligence support because we didn't want to make a mistake. Got a couple deals under LOI and kind of marched forward. I mean, the first few deals, right? Like right now, we have a really well-oiled machine, and we've gone from first call to closed in 13 days. That's abnormally fast. Usually, it's more like 30 to 40 days. Yeah. But we have a really well-oiled machine. But as you might expect, those first few deals, diligence took a really long time because we were just afraid of the unknown unknowns. Documentation took a while because we didn't have standard docs. And so we were kind of creating an asset purchase agreement out of thin air, and it didn't kind of, so it took a while. It took some time to make the first couple acquisitions. In parallel, I think my first employee started, we had a deal under LOI, but it hadn't closed yet. So once I got a deal under LOI, I said, okay, we might have a business here. Let me go hire one person. And then I made a second offer, and he started. I think we had 2 acquisitions closed at the time we started.
Let's talk about the first deal for a minute. So, are you able to disclose what the brand is?
Sure. Yeah, it's Flathead Straws. It's actually, I use it every day. The #1 silicone reusable straw on Amazon.
Okay. And Flathead Straws, so you bought them, you closed on the deal when?
January 1st, 2020. So,
okay. And what were they doing in monthly revenue back then?
I think they were close to $700,000 or $800,000 in the trailing 12 months. So not monthly, but for the full year,
or actually
almost $1 million business.
$1 million business.
Yeah, and I remember they were about $200,000 of SDE. Was the number we paid more attention to, right? We do a multiple of the profit revenue.
And so the founders of this company, now, are they still with you on an earnout, or are they long gone?
Nope. We had a 1-year earnout on that. And he actually made a bunch of money on the earnout. We did quite well with the brand. And he's not involved anymore.
Okay. So there's this guy, he's launched this brand. He's basically sounds like maybe a solo entrepreneur. He grew it to $750,000. And now he's at a point where he's probably bumping into some of his own limitations. He's probably bumping into the fact that he's got to hire more people that maybe he doesn't want to do, or he's bumping, although on this product, maybe not much, but capital issues with respect to the ability to fund inventory. Were any of these things reasons why he wanted to sell?
Yeah, it was twofold. It was a bit of capital constraints. Like, these businesses are cash intensive. You're putting down deposits in Asia, well before products are sellable.
Months and months before you get paid.
Yeah. And so the business had grown really rapidly. So over the summer of that year, he'd been air freighting a whole bunch of stuff in, rush orders, paying a lot of money. And so his actual cash balance was not moving as much as the business would, asset rich and cash poor type of thing. So that was part of it. And then the other one was, I think, frankly, this was way bigger and more successful than he thought it would be. And he kind of wanted to cash in at the top, right? He felt like this had already exceeded his expectations. And so why not take a buyout now And then I think I don't know if he ended up closing it, but he wanted to acquire, he had his eyes on some rental property near him for a while and it was available. Yeah. And so he wanted the cash to go and invest in that other.
Got it. Okay. So I went down that rabbit hole because I know that there are people listening to this who maybe have a young brand and they're thinking that because they've never grown a brand before, they don't know the potholes that are ahead of them. Even for successful brands, there's all these things that are going to come up and potentially really hamstring your ability to get past a certain point. Like it's not like you're going up an escalator. Growing any business is like walking upstairs, and only sometimes the stairs from the third to the fourth stair, it's a huge step. Whereas from the second to the third stair was not a very big step. It's not a linear process. And I wanted to highlight that because if someone is listening and they're running a brand and they're coming into that, they might be listening to you and thinking, well, maybe I should just be selling my company to this guy instead, or maybe I need to talk to somebody or raise some money or what have you. But these are very real issues that all of us entrepreneurs have to deal with on an ongoing basis. All right. So now you've closed 25, 6, 7 deals. We all are not very good at things when we're doing them the first time. We make lots of mistakes. When I say we, I mean me and maybe other people, but I know me because I live with me every day. And then I get better and I figure things out and I dial things in and I make better systems and I make fewer mistakes and, things get better. Looking back with hindsight, what are some of the lessons that you learned about acquiring businesses from, say, the first 3? I know you said you got faster at it, but from the first 3 or 4 to like the last 3, what are some of the takeaways? Because some people are going to be listening to this and they're thinking, well, I'm never going to start an Amazon integrator or roll up or whatever, but I like the idea of buying a business and they've never done it before. And I'm trying to add value for that member of the audience.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of things. Same as you, right? It's hard. Every time you do something the first time, you end up making a lot of mistakes. Where to start? One thought that strikes me right off the top is that these are the entrepreneurs, typically their most valuable asset, right? Think about selling your home and multiply that by 10. And so obviously the dollars and cents are important, but you need to develop trust with the entrepreneur and you need to have credibility with them. Honestly, our first couple of businesses, we stay in touch with a lot of the entrepreneurs, and I'm so thankful that those people sold to us because frankly, it was pretty clear we didn't know what we were doing at that point, right? To them, whether or not, maybe we tried to cover it up, but, at the end of the day, if you're selling your business or you're thinking about buying a business, showing the entrepreneur that you know what you're doing. And now, right, we're at a point where we can introduce an entrepreneur to our supply chain team, to our advertising team. We have a lot of credibility and depth in these spaces, and we really know what we're talking about. But early on, if you're somebody who's thinking about buying your first business, really make sure you're a student of the industry, because from the entrepreneur's perspective, especially if there's an earnout or some sort of structure like that, they want to know that you know what you're doing and you're credible. And even take away the earnout, closing risk is a real thing. You're right. It's easy to have fun conversations about, I'll pay you $5 million for your business. Everybody gets starry eyed. And then, you get into it and the entrepreneur's fear is I'm going to spend all this time doing this. And then this person's going to get cold feet, or they're going to try to retread the deal and give me less money for it. Or they're going to nickel and dime me about we talked to one acquisition we made recently, had an offer from somebody else they turned down. And the person was trying to add in a salary for this person because you don't have a VA and you should have a VA. So I'm going to subtract $50K from your SDE, right? And it's right, nobody wants to deal with that shit. And so,
that's bullshit.
And so just developing a relationship, letting them know that you're serious, and that you're serious because you actually know what you're talking about, and you know the industry, right? Every business has warts. And if you're a buyer who's going to run away at the first sign of a wart, then you're probably not a serious buyer. So developing that trust with the seller, and letting them know that you know what you're doing and you know what you're talking about is really important. And then, I could go on for hours about the long list of things we've discovered post-close that we add to our diligence checklist. There's no perfect recipe to that.
Give me an example of one.
Oh man, we had a seller who had just launched with a new manufacturer, and we got excited because it was lower cost. Already had a container on the water from China, and so it was going to be here soon. And so we diligenced everything. Everything was great. We closed. The container arrived in LA. We put it directly into Amazon. The seller hadn't QA'd it at all. It was really low quality product. Reviews went down. We got shut off by Amazon for NCX issues, right? And then it's really hard. We had our returns going back to Amazon FCs, and they automatically were putting them back into stock.
Oh.
And so it was really hard to actually clear out all this inventory, right? And so luckily we learned that. We actually then had another acquisition. This was like March of 2020, right? So this is early. We had another one over the summer, same thing. And the seller was saying, hey, I already have another manufacturer. The order is going in. They're going to ship it tomorrow. And we said, no, stop the order. It's okay if we go out of stock for a week. We want a sample flown in. We're going to QC the sample before the stuff hits the water. Yeah. And I was so thankful we did, right? There's a bunch of issues, and we stopped it from going on the water before it got shipped. We cleared the QC issues, and we got it going, right? So things like that just in general, you need to make sure that there's no changes to the business that are in flight that haven't settled through the system. Because if existing manufacturer, they've been selling that for years usually. And so you can see the reviews, you can see the return rate, you can see all these things, and you can have confidence that as long as you can maintain that relationship, you'll be okay. That's one. Other things, we bought a company who had been buying reviews. And actually, Amazon's getting scary good about this. So when we found out about it from a notice from Amazon. We contacted the seller. He was very transparent. Once we found it, he was transparent about it. He was like, yeah, you're right.
Once he got caught, he was very transparent about it. How nice of him.
Yeah. And we closed, right? We'd already released escrow. But the thing was, surprisingly, because you pay per review, he actually had the list of every review he paid for and the order it was associated with. And Amazon had already deleted 98% of the reviews that he had paid for, right? So the good news is they're scary good at this. And so the actual rating that we had was the real rating, right? So it didn't actually end up being, which is a scary, heart-stopping moment when we got that notice from Amazon. We submitted a POA. We did the right things, and it was all fine. But it was one of these moments where we're like, all right, let's push just a little bit harder on this one, pre-close. It's a lot of stuff like that, right? And there's always the unknown unknowns. And that's why, early on, if you're a buyer, people might push you to an all cash offer. And maybe that's what you have to do to get the deal done if you don't have any credibility in the market. But getting an earnout in place from a buyer's perspective is really important. One, because it aligns your incentives. We have entrepreneurs reach out to us all the time saying hey, did you notice this? Did you see this thing? I heard about this new exciting thing. I want to make sure you're doing it on my brand. And we love that, right? It's helpful because in general, I'd say at this point, 90% of the stuff we already have our eyes on because we're growing, but especially early on, it was helpful to have that aligned interest where they want us to be successful. But it's also helpful in the downside case of, right? If you're a first time buyer, there are real unknown unknowns that you just can't uncover if you've never run a business like this before. And so I would really encourage you strongly to put some earnout or deferred payment structure into the acquisition because, right, it's really hard to know until you're running the business for a while.
Tell me about your opinion about what makes a really great product, or ASIN, as those of us in the biz will refer to them. What makes a really great ASIN?
Yeah, we follow the data. We look for things that have consistently maintained or grown share, have been able to maintain price leadership, it doesn't have to be price leadership as in being priced the highest, but they're not competing against a kind of, a slowly decaying price war or rapidly decaying, as the case may be. We look for ratings and reviews that are a moat versus competitors, right? So by count and by rating, we want things that are clearly better products, and customers are voting with their feet, and they're voting with their willingness to share their perspectives on the products. We get into the account, we make sure return rate is good, we make sure NCX is good, no IP issues.
What's NCX? I'm not familiar with that
one. Sorry, negative customer experience. It's an Amazon metric. Right? People return stuff and they say, wrong size. They don't think you're on NCX. That's just a return.
Yeah, not as described.
Yeah, exactly. Or chafing, or real customer quality issues. Yeah. Then you get an NCX ding, and if that gets too high, we'll shut off your ASIN and you fix it.
Yeah.
And so we make sure that at the end of the day, the beauty of Amazon is millions of people go on every day and millions of people transact on there. And so we can do we do some subjective tests around. We want to make sure we're not buying fidget spinners at the height of fidget spinners. We want to make sure, we're not buying, we don't buy things in really high product churn categories like high tech, because we're not going to come out with the next best Bluetooth headsets. That's not our business model. But as long as we can see people buying this thing in 10 years, and we can see at least 18 to 24 months of consistent leadership in the category, we think, and that's not, you can't take that for granted, right? Winning on Amazon is not like financial arbitrage where you just buy it and it kind of floats its way along. But we think we have an engine where if you have shown that you're leading within the category, we can take that and we can accelerate it, and we can global and through other channels.
So how are you accelerating? Are you typically, I'm sure you have a playbook or a formula that you're following for this. Maybe I would assume these listings are reasonably well optimized already, because otherwise they wouldn't have got the success that got you interested in buying the company. I mean, are you doing better jobs at PPC, or are you creating some new variations? Or are you going into a new international market? What are some of the things you're doing to cause the brand to grow?
Yeah, a bunch of stuff. And we do have a playbook. The thing that I love about this business is, one, we learn something every day, right? It's fun to kind of, and Amazon's changing, right? It's a competitive, it's millions of sellers, Amazon's changing. So we're always innovating on our playbook. Yeah. But the other thing is that we find, my general theory is successful entrepreneurs typically have at least one superpower, right? But there rarely is anybody, myself included, good at everything, right? And so that's why we're building a team of people who are great at all these things, so we can hopefully be best at everything. But so it varies. Like, we find some entrepreneurs who are amazing at merchandising, and so they have great imagery and they have great videos, and spend zero on PPC, right? And they've just won through amazing product and amazing merchandising. And then we see the other side where people don't have that good at photography and don't have that good at copy, but are just blasting PPC and are winning through PPC, right? And it varies. The playbook is pretty consistent, but where we find the value varies a lot by what the entrepreneur was differentially good at. And then they almost always have a couple of blind spots, right? And so, for example, supply chain is often one of those. We find a lot of entrepreneurs air freighting a lot of things, going out of stock with some consistency, which is maybe supply chain / cash, right? Just people don't have unlimited cash if you're growing a business. So it varies. But in general, we find international expansion to be a really consistent lever. We find usually PPC optimization. Sometimes people have done a truly best-in-class job, and there's a little bit less for us to do there. But in general, we find we can be better at that.
What's your favorite software tool? What's your favorite software tool for managing PPC campaigns?
We are currently using 4 different software tools and also building an in-house overlay on them. We found there's a bunch of pretty good ones out there. We haven't found one that's doing it the way that we want to do it quite yet. And so we're building a bunch of our own stuff. The thing is, to do it well, PPC does not exist in a vacuum, right? PPC depends on your competitive landscape. It depends on your organic ranking. It depends on your price versus competitors. And so to get an integrated view on that and to create an algorithm that takes those things into account is something we haven't found. So there's a bunch of people who are good at PPC as PPC only, right? As kind of an ad optimization engine, which we're still leveraging those platforms to do that. Once we've kind of done our math around, is this a price elastic category or is this an aspirational category where we can price up by 30% and use PPC to support that, right? You need to be thoughtful. It's not one size fits all with PPC. It depends a lot on the category, the competitive landscape, your margins, your price point, things like that, your organic ranking. It's really important. So we find that's a viewpoint that we found a lot of success with, but it's hard to execute, right? We are building a software platform because we are managing at this point probably tens of thousands of keywords a day and hundreds of ad campaigns a day, and integrating those, right? Organic rank, ad campaign, price, competitor share gains and loss, and doing all that math every day now and soon to be hourly is pretty unique and is helping
That's a
us
lot
kind
of
of
moving
consistently win parts. It is, which is why we're not doing it with humans, right? We're doing it with software.
Yeah.
And that's, a third of our team are software engineers. And we're continuing to build in that way, because that is, I think, where we win. And not to say we win at the expense of other people's winning. I think this is so big, many people will likely win over time. But our secret sauce is that if we create the right technology platform, we can continue to buy hundreds and thousands of brands, and we throw them into this machine that is just really good at what it's doing. And then we have a bunch of mechanics working on making the machine better, not people trying to go line by line through PPC campaigns and trying to figure out if it's a good bid or not.
How many people are on the team now?
32.
So 10 of them are engineers.
Yeah, 9 maybe.
9.
Yeah.
And how many are in M&A deal flow?
3 or 4.
But you also now probably have a pretty decent network of brokers who are not employees, but they're essentially working for you, and that they're continuously looking for deals for you.
Correct. We use a lot of brokers. We also have a really high Nate, who runs M&A for us. I always tell him he's running a B2B sales team.
Oh,
right. His job. What's that?
I said, I agree completely. A year and a half ago, I interviewed a guy who was buying brands, and his deal flow strategy was brilliant. And it was all basically reverse B2B sales.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And so there's a lot of parts to that we could talk about. But the most important part to me is customer service. At the end of every deal, we should get an NPS of 10. NPS is just Net Promoter Score. It's a way of measuring customer satisfaction. And so we get a lot of our deals through referrals. We get sellers telling their friends, call Perch. Those guys are fair. They're fast. They know what they're doing. I'm getting my earnout, right? They tell you they're going to deliver on this earnout. They're delivering on their earnouts. And that is really how we win on the M&A side, because there's a lot of people out there, and a lot of people are calling every seller and saying, we want to buy your company. And like I said earlier, sellers don't want to get into an LOI with somebody who might nickel and dime them, and who might, back away at the last minute or not have any funds, things like that. And so we find it's really powerful to have that referral network.
Yeah, it's the Warren Buffett buying strategy. Be the very best, most credible, most trusted buyer in the marketplace, and you'll get first kick at the can at most of the good deals. And in some of those cases, as I'm sure has happened for Berkshire Hathaway on many occasions, there is no other buyer. Yeah. The company just comes and says, we want to sell to you. And Warren Buffett's famous for, making handshake deals and doing, multi-$100 million or maybe even $1 billion transactions in a matter of hours, which is cool.
Yeah.
I'm sure his due diligence team's going in after that and doing their thing, but Warren and the seller come to an agreement in a very, very short period of time.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So let's close out with this. What do you see for the future? Both in terms of opportunities, which I'm assuming is just more, and then challenges.
Yeah, the opportunity is I really believe that we can build a consumer products company that is taking these really impressive products and brands and making them household names. And that's not a 2021 thing, right? It takes a long time and a lot of effort to get your products in all the Walmarts and all the Targets and across e-com channels and D2C, right? It's not an Amazon only play. So I think this is why we don't call ourselves an Amazon aggregator internally. Mm-hmm. Because that is like step 0 of the strategy. Mm-hmm. Because we think it's just the barriers to entry for new products has come down so much. 5 or 10 years ago, you probably needed $100,000, if not $250,000 to launch a new consumer product, because you had to buy a whole container load, right? An MOQ was so high, you had to buy a bunch of it. You probably had to fly yourself to Asia first, because Alibaba didn't exist, right? So you fly yourself to Asia, find a factory if you're lucky enough to get a good deal and not get ripped off, and then buy a whole lot of it, come over here, find retail distribution, start, you float the working capital. It's really hard. And today you can launch a product on Amazon, source it through Alibaba and launch it on Amazon for $1,000. And so millions of people are going to keep launching these products. And the beauty of what's happening is that quality wins, reviews win, social coverage wins. People don't care about we like Super Bowl commercials. They're fun to watch. But people buy based on reviews and organic ranking and social, because they trust their peers more than they trust a $5 million social or Super Bowl ad. And so we think the trend is that this is going to continue. Micro brands are going to continue to take meaningful share of overall retail. Consumers want it, and they trust these brands. And so our job is to capture and accelerate the best of those brands and make them into global household names. And we're just getting started. It feels like the first pitch of the first inning on what we're building. And then the challenge is it's really hard, right? This is a really hard business to run. And we're leaning heavy into technology. Like, I think most other people at our scale would probably have 100 employees. And we have 30, and a third of them are engineers. And so we're leaning deep into the technology because we think, especially within e-commerce, that's a path to, like, if we were hiring a whole lot of employees for every brand, at some point you just run into a wall. You just can't hire enough people to keep doing that forever. And we're going to be able to continue to accelerate and go cross-channel and do that in a really, really scale way. But it's really hard to have the discipline to invest in technology. The easy path is always, let's hire a 22-year-old to go do this thing. It's really hard to go multi-channel, multi-geography. It's really hard managing a physical supply chain at scale, right? This is there's a lot of moving pieces of these businesses, and there's a reason why Procter & Gamble and Unilever are highly acquisitive. They spend between $20 and $40 billion a year on M&A. And the reason they're not doing this is because they know how to run a $500 million business. They don't know how to run $105 million businesses.
Yeah.
And the reason is, for example, what I was just talking about, the headcount model, right? You can't, their model is they have brand managers and inventory managers and all these people in every single brand. And obviously they're worth hundreds of billions of dollars and they're being successful in their own way. But the real differentiator that is hard is managing a whole lot of discrete moving pieces on each brand is a massive challenge and complexity just to keep them from not falling apart. And then add on top of that, growing them and taking them to new geographies and taking them to new channels and all of the variations that come with that. So we don't take it for granted. We feel like it's been an amazing ride, but we're also just getting started and there's a lot of hard work ahead of us.
All right, gang, the company is Perch. My guest has been Chris Bell. Chris, if people want to get in touch with you to start a conversation about selling their brand to you, I'm assuming if they just go to perchhq.com, there's probably a form somewhere on the website that they can fill out.
That's correct. Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for making some time to be on the show. It's been a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, Trent. Nice chatting with you. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to get to the show notes for today's episode, you can do that by going to brightideas.co/361. And if you haven't already done so, I would be absolutely thrilled and filled with gratitude if you would take a moment and leave a rating and review for the show on your favorite podcast listening app. Thanks so much for tuning in. Have an absolutely wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much for listening to the Bright Ideas Podcast. Check us out on the web at brightideas.co.
All right, show's over. I'm tired.